On the line, every minute can make a difference, but the next time you or your loved one is having an emergency, you might have to wait.
Fox 12 investigates the impact of long 911 call wait times in Portland and what local leaders are doing to help solve the problem. Investigative reporter Adrian Thomas is in the studio with us. Adrian, good morning.
Kim, Shauna, good morning. According to the director of Portland's Bureau of Emergency Communications, in 2018, most 911 calls were being answered in about 10 seconds. Currently, the average wait time before you can even talk to a dispatcher when calling 911 is 50 seconds, according to recent Bureau of Emergency Communications data, which the director says is much higher than the national standard. One family shares their story of dealing with these wait times in 2022 while the life of their loved one was hanging in the balance. On April 7th, 2022, Robert Van Pelt died of a heart attack in his home in Portland. According to his family, he was suffering from congestive heart failure and diabetes. His wife, Candace Ironhawk, and daughter, Morgan Van Pelt, were there that day and had just left to take Morgan's younger sister to a softball game.
He was cooking dinner, and we were all excited because our nieces and our nephews were coming over, and he was really excited about that. And we kind of just walked out the door and was like, I love you, bye.
But when they returned after the game that evening, they found Robert unconscious.
And I had actually walked right past him, and then when I walked back again, something caught my eye, and I looked down and saw him on the floor.
It then became a race to get help, complicated by a frustrating delay, with Morgan and Candace trying to call for an ambulance.
So I called 911, and it put me on a hold where it was like, someone will be with you shortly. Please don't hang up. And I was kind of freaking out, and so I hung up. And then I called back again, and I think I did that like twice before I finally got someone on the phone.
According to call records from Portland's Bureau of Emergency Communications, 2 calls were made at about 6:15 p.m. from Morgan and Candace, which the 2 of them say they disconnected after being told they were being placed on hold. Records show a 3rd call from them was received a minute later at 6:16 p.m. that evening and placed in the 911 queue and answered by a dispatcher at 6:19 p.m., a total of about 4 minutes before actually talking to a 911 dispatcher.
What's going on?
My husband, I think he's dead on the floor, but I can't tell.
Okay, how old is he?
Well, he's 60 years old.
Okay, did you just find him this way?
I came home and he was face down on our bedroom floor.
Morgan and Candace say the experience felt excruciatingly long. According to 911 call records, the dispatcher gave CPR instructions to Morgan and Candace once the call was taken at 6:19 p.m., and paramedics arrived on scene by 6:25. But it was too late for Robert Van Pelt. His family still relives those harrowing moments on hold and wonders why it took so long before they could talk to someone.
Traumatizing is a good way to say it. I was horrified, actually. I was like, what? I just, like I said, I didn't know that it was even possible to be put on hold from 911.
At Portland's Bureau of Emergency Communications, Director Bob Kazi says increased call volume in the last few years, integrating new technology for triaging medical calls, and staffing issues have all contributed to increased call wait time.
We saw the peak of our wait times really last year and the previous year. There's a number of reasons for that. We had the pandemic, we had protests, riots. All of that increased our call volume, and we experienced a lot of burnout with our staff. We also implemented new technology for medical and fire call processing, so there was a learning curve for that.
Kazi says currently it's on average about a 50-second wait time for someone calling 911 in Portland to reach a dispatcher. Kazi says he's not okay with this, but says things are improving.
A 911, in my opinion, shouldn't have any wait. Our goal is to get to a point where we're meeting national standards for 911 call answering, and that's answering 95% of our calls on 911 within 20 seconds. That's our goal. I personally want to see that down to 10 seconds, and that's pretty close to where we were back in 2018.
But for Candace Ironhawk and Morgan Van Pelt, the pain of losing their husband and father has caused them to lose faith in calling 911 altogether.
I don't have a lot of faith in him now. You know, my thought is if I needed to do something, I guess my first thought wouldn't be to call 911 now. My first thought would be, what can I do? You know, and depending on what's going on, if my kid's cut herself or whatever, I mean, obviously I would scoop her up and take her to the hospital or, you know, try to stop the baby. But my first thought would not be 911 now.
Bob Kazi also told us that the Bureau of Emergency Communications is funded for 136 dispatchers, but they currently have about 25 vacancies right now, with 50 new hires going through training, which takes about a year and a half to complete. Kazi also added the Bureau is piloting new artificial intelligence technology on its non-emergency dispatch line to ease some of the calls flooding 911 dispatchers.
Adrian, were you able to do some research and find out what the average wait time was in April of 2022 when Robert Van Pelt died?
Yeah, so according to Bureau of Emergency Communications, or BOEC data, that average call wait time was 63 seconds.
Wow.
In April 2022.
Wow.
And for the rest of that year, especially through the summer, the wait time got worse. If we look at August 2022, it got up to 84 seconds, which is a minute and 24 seconds waiting to talk.
And we talk
to
about a
someone.
heart attack with him, but we also talk about, stroke. Seconds count with a
Right.
stroke, right? So, I mean,
Absolutely.
those seconds are like a lifetime.
Well, we've often been told, don't try to drive somebody to the hospital yourself. Let the medical professionals come to you. So, I mean, it is a scary situation. You mentioned AI technology, try to help, because we know non-emergency calls are a big problem. Were you able to come up with sort of how many non-emergency versus emergency, and how is AI going to help?
Yeah, so we reported back on this in June when BOEC announced that they were going to start testing out artificial intelligence technology on their non-emergency dispatch line. At the time, they told us that last year about a third of calls that dispatchers took were on the non-emergency line. So they're still kind of trialing this technology, giving some trials of this technology. But it could take a huge weight off of dispatchers, especially if a third of the calls they're taking is non-emergency.
Wow.
All right, quite a story. Thank you, Adrian.